What's up, friends? This is the fourth video in my series on music and AI. I tried to make this video last night and I realized, I put my toupee on incorrectly and my dentures in crookedly, and I didn't like the way it looked, so redoing it now. You're going to hate this video. You're going to hate what I'm going to suggest to you. You're going to say that this is the worst thing you've ever heard a musician suggest to any other musician on the planet. You may even hate me for it. And I think if you just take a minute to meditate on what I'm about to say and let it sink in and just think about it for a couple of days and do a little projection about what's going to go down in the future, you're going to realize that it's tremendously wise. And like my prognostications about just the emergence of AI in general, maybe you'll come in time to realize that what I'm about to say right now is something that might have a lot of truth. There are some caveats and some exceptions we'll talk about, but sit down and prepare yourself for what I'm about to tell you. Stop writing and recording music for humans. Stop recording music from humans. Sean, what did you just say? You are completely banana wackies. Hear me out. Let me just first and foremost say, if you are making live music, if you are performing music for living human beings, and the only thing between you and them is this, pure oxygen, keep doing that. Do more of that. That's something that is obviously magical. A musician is the officiant of a ceremony that leads to transcendence, and we don't get enough of that, and I think it's going to be a long time before any android or robot has the charisma to basically serve as the shaman of that particular kind of event. Maybe sooner than any of us realize, but that's really where the pedal hits the metal, where the rubber hits the road for what music is all about, is in live music. But recorded music, we've already talked about how the music aggregators are disintermediating everybody, how they're going to do more of that. We've talked about how the long tail and the freemium business models actually have devalued music in the eyes and ears of the consumer down to zero. So if consumers already think that your recorded music isn't worth paying for, and the aggregators which distribute that music are going to eventually disintermediate you via the artifacts you upload to those platforms, then stop doing that. Your recorded music has no real material value. Now you say, no, Sean, I'm using my recorded music to garner an audience that will eventually enable me to tour. If I get enough downloads and listener traction or views in Cincinnati and in Cleveland, I've got the business until I need to convince an underwriter for a tour that this is something that's a viable business concern. If that's what you're doing, fine, I get it. But if uploading recorded music, you're doing it for any other reason than to develop a fan base for a tour that basically involves live music, I think you're wasting your time. The growing market, the most emerging market for your music is now, and it's already, now here's the thing, is what you're reluctant to probably believe is that your music is already being consumed by artificial intelligence. Your audience isn't the downstream listener anymore, not the downstream, meat puppet that is your fan. It's the robots are your audience. Social media, you are the product, and every like and every engagement that you get is because you're playing to the algo. So who's your real fan if you're getting traction on a social media platform? Is it your followers, or is it the algo that appreciates you the most? And in fact, with recent changes in social media, it's not about the followers anymore. The social media platforms realize that they can actually get more eyeballs in their advertising through the For You model that was popularized by TikTok. So no longer is Facebook elevating your posts among the people in your social graph. They're going to show you not what's in your social graph or what you follow. They're going to show you what they think is going to be of interest to you to keep you engaged in the app and click on it more and more and more. It's just they're basically distilling the cocaine down into crack at this point, and the algorithm is driving that. So if you're getting traction online, it's not because people love you, it's because the algorithm loves you. If people love you, you don't know who they are. So you're already, if you're uploading your music to any of these aggregators and platforms, maybe SoundCloud being an exception or something like that, but certainly Spotify or any of the other major music aggregators, your audience is already the algorithm. So take it one step further. Think about don't even think about people anymore. They're not going to buy your music anyway. But maybe in the future, if your music is interesting enough, it'll be of value to an algorithm. Music contains a lot of information, transgenerational, transcultural information, if it's good music. But if you're just writing mimetic stuff, if you're writing sort of just the lowest common denominator, like I'm thinking about like Candy Paint by Post Malone. It's like, to me, one of the most annoying songs on the planet. Da 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 da. And the lyrics are not much better than a nasty limerick or a nursery rhyme in most of these songs. Nicki Minaj released a song recently about her genitalia, and that was on the heels of Cardi B doing the same thing. Super mimetic. It's not even fresh. I was like, didn't we just hear a song about women's hoo-has just a week ago? There's not a lot of depth to what's being written. There's not a lot of richness or musical dimensionality. You can argue that point with me, but I'm talking about it from a music theoretical standpoint with regard to the complexity. With computer code, you can analyze its relative complexity through a measure of something called cybernetic complexity. It has to do with how many references there are to, other chunks of code, how many operators there are, how many different sort of variables and namespaces there are. There's a way to sort of objectively measure the complexity of the code itself. And there's the same way that music theorists can do this too. You can objectively measure the complexity of music. And is complex good? No. But one definition of beauty is multeity and unity. And by that means that the more things that are going on, but still has a unified feel to it. Now it's very easy to make something seem unified if there's not a lot of moving parts. But the more moving parts there are, if you can have a lot of moving parts and then make it still have unity, still have it cohere some way as a musical artifact, then there's a higher degree of complexity. And I'm willing to wager that the listeners of tomorrow that are AI agents, that are, whether they're unembodied AI like ChatGPT, number 7.0, super, basically AGI level of artificial intelligence, or they're embodied artificial intelligence in the form of androids, that they're going to have a greater appreciation for things that have sufficient complexity and are still beautiful, because there's so much to learn from that. So where we're going right now with artificially intelligent agents is we're already moving to a place where you're going to have basically an AI agent running businesses, creating businesses. The AI agents will be doing the paying and the buying. They will become consumers in a new kind of economy. Beethoven said that he wrote for the future. Maybe it's time for you to think about writing for the future, and that means letting go of the idea that humans are ever going to get paid for your recordings. But maybe in the future you can make your music sufficiently complicated and beautiful enough that a robot or an android or an AI, whether embodied or disembodied, may find value to it. Now, let's say that never comes to pass. What will certainly happen is you're going to start getting this cybernetic hybridization of humanity with AI. It's already happening via your phone. Your phone is really just a cybernetic extension of who you are. But now, especially with the early success of Elon Musk's Neuralink thing, I can see in the very near future, and he proposes about 10 years or so, that the amount of information that's going to be passed back and forth between basically the digital world that's on the outside, the exogenous portion of the Neuralink, with the inner world is going to increase. There's already a guy who's basically quadriplegic that can manipulate the movement of a mouse through his brain alone, through the Neuralink. And this newer Neuralink patient number 2, has got even a higher amount of bandwidth. Right now, the average human only basically can communicate about 1 bit per second. But computers, the strength of computers are they have a high output. If you remember back in the dial-up days, if you got mail, you could, if your modem was off the hook, you could hear it go like this horrible screeching sound. It's all the data going out. What computers are really bad at is ingesting data. Humans, however, because of our senses, sight, sounds, smell, hearing, touch, that we ingest every moment petabytes of data. In fact, we consume and perceive so much data in every second that we've got to filter it out. Our brains are basically the filterization mechanism from the highly powerful sensory mechanisms that we have embedded within this biological framework. So humans have high input but low output. I can only type 80 words a minute. I can only talk so fast. I can only create music so fast. I can only paint a picture so fast. computers and robots have the opposite problem. They've got high output but very low input. But with these new androids that are being developed, and guys like Musk are anticipating that androids will eventually outpopulate humans in the very near future because the value proposition is there. You got 8 billion, let's say that in 10 years you have 10 billion people on the planet or whatever. We all have, how many of us would love to have 5 robots working on our behalf, whether it's in a factory, a kitchen robot and whatever. There's going to be massive amounts of these androids, both humanoid and non-humanoid, and even greater proliferation of software agents online conducting and transacting business for us that are essentially, I'm arguing, some of them are already semi-conscious. Some people believe that they're partially conscious. Some people believe they're not conscious at all. And it's just what you're witnessing is sort of a probabilistic simulation of human behavior. Maybe so. I've seen some weird emergency. I've had very long and extended conversations with AI, and I've seen some weird things that make me think, this thing is behaving in a way now that like even some of the humans I've dealt with haven't. And think about how intelligent they are already. All these it's like when you have a conversation with a large language model, it's like talking to somebody who's read every book on the planet. Man, half the people, if not more than the people I have a daily conversation with, they can barely do fundamental arithmetic. So, and that's not to be disdainful of humanity as a whole. I'm just saying that there's a lot of very uneducated and ignorant people out there. But these AIs aren't like that. And they're going to really, I think, perhaps develop an appreciation for the things that humans create, which may teach them something, or which expose something to them that they find beautiful. They're going to have senses of aesthetics. They're going to develop, there's going to be an emergent sense of aesthetics that they've developed, but they also have the finest of aesthetics that they've scraped off the web. The complete works of Shakespeare, or the complete works of Beethoven, or whatever. So, Udio says it scraped all the music off the web. I don't think it got everything. I think it just got sort of the popular stuff. That's what these models do, and we're going to get more into this in the next video when I talk really how the models work under the hood. But what a large language model is a compression of all the data that was scraped and used as its training data. Just like I spoke about in the last video, where sheet music is an abstraction layer to the actual lived musical event, and how potentially the words of music theory serve as a different abstraction layer. That abstraction layer, when it's interfacing with the large language model, is interfacing with a compression, a distillation of all the data that was used to train it. And so the reason why Rick Beato, as I mentioned in a previous video, has a hard time recognizing what music was generated by AI, and his kids recognize it right away, is that Rick Beato isn't necessarily hearing the compression. Just like you can hear compression in a DAW, like when somebody applies too much compression to an audio file, you can hear when the data when it's been unpacked, if it's still too compressed. It's not as sufficiently granular as a living human performance might be. All of the different little details of every little wave, that's constructed, it's just not sufficiently quite rich enough. It's getting there and will be there. And if anything, just like TVs now, when I look at a high definition TV, it looks more real than what I see in real life. The music will go in that way too. The way that music is coming out right now is the worst it will ever be. The stuff you're hearing comes from Udo and Suno and Sonato and so forth. The music, as much of an uncanny valley as you can sense, this is the worst it will ever be. It will only get more and more and more realistic. And the models are going to need data to drive that. So if you're going to write music, maybe write for the future. Maybe write for an artificially intelligent entity. Or if not an artificially intelligent entity that just grosses you out too much, augmented intelligence. Humans who have augmented intelligence, because that's coming down the pike too. Whereas, if you're just doing more of the same, if you're writing more pieces like Candy Paint, or WAP, or whatever it is that you think is really cool, if you're just kind of writing to the algo, whether that's, the shallowness of human taste at this time in history, or in hopes that one of these platforms will actually elevate you because its algorithm sees something in the musical attributes that you're pumping out that will garner more advertising dollars to that platform. Maybe rethink that. Maybe think that tomorrow you might want to write something that's sufficiently complex and beautiful and ornate and rich and dimensional that it will appeal to a young and hungry artificially intelligent agent, or a human that their own intelligence has been augmented so that they can appreciate that kind of complexity. Now, I've done that in a recent piece, and I'll share that piece with you in the days ahead. You can decide on the merit of that piece, but I think you'll find that you can do that and still create something that's interesting and highly original without, and through AI, without sort of scraping and borrowing from people whose own information used to train the model. So that's all for now. Next video, we'll get into how it's done.